evening. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard. You're watching The Pipeline. Today, on November 9th, 2022, I'm joined, as always, by Western Standard opinion editor Nigel Hannaford. Nigel.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. And joined by bear hunter extraordinaire, Western Standard Alberta senior columnist, Cory Morgan. How are you, Cory?
Very good.
Okay, well, we've got a great show today. We're going to talk about Danielle Smith's by-election win in Brooks Medicine Hat. I think we're going to have a little more insight into this than some other media, because we know that area pretty well, don't we? There's a big win, but there's some interesting pieces of the puzzle here to be connected. We're also going to talk about Saskatchewan joining the Sovereignty Pact. Now that it's no longer just Alberta, I think we need a name for these provinces coming together, resisting enforcement of certain federal laws in the provincial jurisdiction. So I'm just going to call it the Sovereignty Pact. Saskatchewan introducing the Saskatchewan First Act. Very interesting. We're going to talk about that and some of the constellation of other provinces and territories kind of gathering around Alberta and Saskatchewan and joining in this direction. Last night was also the midterm elections in the United States. Republicans, not all of the results are in yet, but it appears that Republicans have taken the House of Representatives and might maybe take the U.S. Senate as well, although that might not be known for several weeks. And we're also going to talk in terms of the U.S. midterms, the influence of Donald Trump. Was this a help or a hindrance to Republicans as they gear up for the next set of elections in 2 years, including a presidential election? So we're going to talk about that as well. Before we get going, we've got to thank my favorite sponsor, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. You've heard it a million times, and I'm going to say it again. I've been a member of the CSSA for over a decade because they are Canada's leading and best firearms rights group. They are on the front lines defending the rights of firearms owners to legally and justly buy, possess, and use their firearms safely in Canada. Without the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, gun rights would be set a long way back by now. They'd probably already entirely be gone. Thankfully, in Alberta, we might not be enforcing some of those federal laws. We're going to see what happens on that front. See how the new Alberta Sovereignty Act is applied, how the Saskatchewan First Act is applied. But there is good news for gun owners in Canada that they have an organization like this standing up for their rights. But don't be a freeloader. Support them. If you're not yet a member of the CSSA, go to cssa-cila.org and sign up as a member right now. And while you're at it, if you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, shame on you. Go to westernstandard.news right now and sign up. You'll get unlimited access to all Western Standard content. One of the only remaining media in Canada that refuse to take a cent of the federal government's big media bailout. Okay, so let's get into it. Pretty close to here at home. So disclosure, for those who don't know, the riding of Brooks Medicine Hat, that is a redrawn constituency. Before it was redrawn, it was Strathmore-Brooks, and then combinations of riding called Medicine Hat and Cypress Medicine Hat. So half of this new constituency I represented when I was in the political arena in Strathmore-Brooks. I know Medicine Hat decently well and Cypress County decently well, but I really know Brooks and Newell County, which is half of this constituency, very, very well. So we're going to dive into it. Danielle Smith, I think approximately October 6th or so, was elected UCP leader, sworn in days later as premier, but quickly needed a seat in the legislature. Michaela Glasgow, the UCP MLA for the area, immediately resigned her seat to open up the spot for Danielle Smith. Danielle Smith goes in. Last night we get the results, about 54.5-ish% of the vote. It's a clear win. No one was close to her. But I think it was a little less than some were thinking. It was setting for expectations. So for context, the UCP, so the combined Wild Rose and PC parties and the UCP in the last election won about 66% of the vote in a different configuration of the riding. So it's not apples to apples. When I was there as just Wild Rose, I had about 54, 55% as just a Wild Rose candidate, the PCs being the next there. So 54.5% is down. Nigel, do you think did Smith fail to meet expectations, or is there any signs of trouble that she wasn't able to do better than 55?
I don't think so. For one thing, it was a by-election, and by-elections tend not to be kind to the government in power. Mm-hmm. So she's the government. Everybody thought, oh, well, that's fine. It's in the bag for her. She got 54.5%. I think Michaela had 60%, and that's close enough to be comfortable for a by-election. She can go forward thinking that the party's behind her. I think what's interesting is what happened to the NDP and the Alberta Party. The other two small parties dropped off, basically.
Yeah.
But I was surprised to see the Alberta Party showing up with 17%, and I think that's got to be a concern for the NDP, because obviously people who, for whatever reason, don't want to vote for the UCP, don't want to vote for the NDP, there they have a place they can park their vote. May not be good news for the UCP either, but it's certainly not good news for the NDP.
Okay, so a high level, we're going to break down into the riding a bit. We've got some maps, some nice colored, pretty maps of how the parties did, poll by poll. Mm-hmm. Cory, do you think there's an issue here that it was still a smashing win? 55% is a big win, but this is Brooks Medicine Hat. This isn't Calgary Elbow. This should be core conservative territory. This area was Wild Rose in 2012 and 2015. Do you think do you think these results have got a warning sign in it for Smith and the UCP?
I would think it's almost a tepid win. I mean, it's a win. There's no doubt. It was never at risk of an NDP coming in or anything. But it wasn't something where you could pop the champagne corks and say, oh, yeah, we've got some momentum here. I can really hit the ground running in this next 6 months. And it's a tentative endorsement. As Nigel said, it's a by-election. I mean, people who, the turnouts are low. The people who do come out are usually people who are ticked off about something. They're motivated to come out. So it's hard to read too much into it. But I'm sure she really would have loved it if she could have gotten 65% or even something higher than the last one to point at and just say, we're on a really good course. But I mean, again, it would have been disastrous had she gone even below that 50% number, because that's a real psychological difference that you don't have the majority in that constituency any longer. But I think they're going to have to read those tea leaves carefully. When you break it down, when you start to see some of those Medicine Hat polls and things like that, there's a lot to read into why that number came to where it is. And the Alberta Party factor, I mean, that's as strong as they're ever going to be. That's their leader in his home riding, a popular, well-spoken man.
Former mayor.
Yeah, of Brooks. I mean, it was a fluke of circumstances that he happened to get that opportunity in the by-election. But at the same time, the Alberta Party, it will give them a little bit more new life, and they're always there. They just won't go away. They're like a nagging itch in the back of your mouth.
Okay, well, we're going to get we're going to go into the different parties here.
Sure. Okay. So either way,
we're going to go in. I'm really what I'm trying to do is get you off of saying something that's going to earn you another Starfish Award around here.
Say if they're a nagging fish,
when I get onto the itches, yes.
What's the NDP?
Yeah. Okay. So let's pull up some maps. We've got the UCP map here. It's kind of a heat map. By color. So dark blue is where the UCP did very well. Extremely light blue would be where they did poorly. So this is just the UCP result where their strengths and weaknesses are. It's not even in relative to other parties. It's relative to their own performance. So you'll see on the map here that Smith and the UCP did pretty strongly in Newell County. That's the area surrounding Brooks on the north side of this constituency map. So Newell County, that'll be some villages, Dutchess, Patricia, places like that, tiny little hamlets, Tilly, Rolling Hills, places most of you have probably never heard of before. But I've spent an inordinate amount of time bumping around in a truck in. She did very strongly in those areas, not surprising. That's cattlemen and oilmen's country. You don't get more conservative than that. You've got Brooks. She did pretty strong there. She did strong in Cypress County. That's the rural area surrounding Medicine Hat, or the north side of Medicine Hat in this constituency. But in Medicine Hat proper, you see her vote drops off quite a bit. So it's a lighter shade of blue. So we'll pull up the NDP map now. So you're going to see orange, dark orange, strong NDP, light orange, weak NDP. You'll see they have very next to no life in Newell County. Not a big surprise. I never met a New Democrat out there. I guess they technically are there, but they stay pretty hidden. Tiny bit in Brooks, more in Brooks than in Newell. Not much in Cypress County. really their support in this came in Medicine Hat proper. I mean, a bit odd to see even Medicine Hat have any significant NDP support, but there is some NDP support there. But none of those two things are very unusual. The more unusual one is the Alberta party map. So we're going to pull up the Alberta party map now in purple. Dark purple, strong relative for, again, this is not who won the area, but it's their own relative strengths. Dark purple is stronger Alberta party. Light purple, weak Alberta party. You'll see it's heavily concentrated in Brooks, and that's not any that's not a surprise, because the Alberta party candidate, as you're saying, Corey, Barry Morishita. So I've known this guy for a while. He was a very long time city councillor. Yes, Brooks says it's a city. They fashion themselves a city. It's officially a city. So he was a long time city councillor. And he served a term as mayor, and he's been around a long time, very connected in the community. He's also the Alberta Party's leader. I don't think he was expecting that he was going to get a by-election in his riding and that he'd be facing the premier, UCP premier. It was quite unexpected, but he couldn't bow out, obviously. So my gut, Nigel, is that this probably artificially pumped the Alberta Party's numbers up. It, most cases, you're not going to have your leader running in a by-election where he's been the mayor of the town. It's a lot of good circumstances for it. The Alberta Party also threw the kitchen sink at it. From what I could tell, it looks like they probably spent most of their war chest on it. I'd be surprised if they had much more money left over. You kind of got at this before. You said that the Alberta Party's relative strength here should be of concern to the NDP. But I don't know. I think it might be the other side around here. They fashion themselves as center. I've always considered them a bit more of a moderate center-left party. Kind of less insane liberals. Still a bit woke and things, but less insane than federal liberals say. Do you think that support came primarily? Is it more concerning to the NDP or the UCP here, or is this just totally a local phenomenon and there's not much to see because this was just the Barry Morishita effect?
Okay, so probably a local effect because of the unique circumstances, and it takes more than just a policy platform and candidates to go and win an election. Mm-hmm. So when the big one comes around next May, can this party field 83 candidates? If they can field 83 candidates, can they afford to actually run a campaign? Cost money to find the buses, go to the events, do all of those things. So yes, in many ways, probably a local phenomenon. Nevertheless, picture a person who is not kind of crazy liberal, but on the other hand has decided that the UCP has had so much internal trouble that they just don't want to vote for them. It may not even be to do with Danielle Smith. Well, I guess it could be if somebody thinks the Sovereignty Act is a bad idea and can't be convinced otherwise. Whatever the reason, they just don't want to vote UCP. But they're only liberal, not half crazy. They'll never vote for the NDP. Park your vote with the Alberta Party. They might reason. People have parked votes before. They parked them with the Green Party, and Green Party people have been elected to legislatures and MPs. They never expected to be so, but they just got the benefit of the draft of somebody who didn't want to vote for the main parties. That could be something. I would think it would be more likely to hurt the NDP than the UCP, only because if your choice, if you really don't want to vote for the UCP, then the NDP is your only choice. You might do that. Mm-hmm. But if there's some kind of quiet little place where you can just say, well, I voted and I put my vote there, mm-hmm. You might do that.
Well, there's also, by-elections. One reason, there's several reasons they're often unfriendly towards governments, as you guys were saying. Well, you could send a message, but one reason that unexpected things happen mm-hmm. is that they're very low risk. If the party, you don't like the big option, well, you could vote for whoever you want, and the government's not going to change. Although if the premier is running, well, it would still create some chaos if the premier lost the by-election. It'd be a bit different. But, in a by-election, it's not the general election. You might say, I don't know, the UCP's just been too chaotic for the last 3 years, really. But the NDP, they're crazy, I can't do it. Well, whatever. I could vote Alberta Party comfortably because Nothing's going to change. It's a by-election. What's the worst that's going to happen? A single seat in the legislature changes. Big deal. Cory, the Alberta Party, I think, has been a figment of the media's imagination for like 12 years or something. It's just, ever since kind of the Nenshi-ite crew in Calgary got together, they had the Big Think,
the Big Listen and all their other weird.
Yeah. Oh, the Big Listen. Big Listen. That was it. It's a party that's attracted grass tops, some notable people, but has generally failed to attract grassroots, significant voters, significant volunteers, significant donors, that kind of thing. The media they always, if you want, listen, any political panel, I hate that we're doing it right now, but we're doing it for a point.
Yes.
They always say, oh, what about the Alberta Party? Could this be their time? And it never, ever materializes. They had they won Calgary Obo in 2015, and that was it. And they won it with a four-way split between Wild Rose, PC, NDP, and Alberta Party. They won it in a four-way split.
And it was one good candidate. It was based on him, not the party.
It was their leader. Yeah. They threw the kitchen sink into one riding, which is smart when you're a new party trying to break through, but they did everything for it. And they've vanished. They had a bunch of floor crossers for the 2019 election. I think they had like 3 or 4 people in the legislature, ended it with none. Former Minister of Health, Jim Prentice bigwig, Stephen Mandel, former mayor of Edmonton. So here, Barry Morishita's result, 17%, nothing to sneeze at. I mean, it's a respectable result for a small party. But 17%, when you have an unpopular government that's been in deep internal chaos for 3 years, has been making tons of unpopular decisions, angering left and right. You've got your candidate is the leader of your party and the mayor of the town with deep connections, and you max out at 17%. In that context, is this a win for the Alberta Party, or is this a loss? Is this?
I still think it's a win as far as they're concerned. Everybody had forgotten about them. Even they got some oxygen here. As you said, they're always artificially have their tires pumped by the media for whatever reason over the years, and they're not going to go away. They're not going to be a threat to win seats in the next election. But unfortunately, what it is they'll be a factor. They will be in Calgary. They'll have some candidates, and they'll grab between 3 and 5% each. But when we look at Calgary being the battleground of the next election, that 3 to 5% is going to be the difference between a lot of UCP and NDP candidates. And as Nigel's saying, the big question is, where are they pulling their votes from? I mean, if they're really pulling them from the UCP, then it really could be harmful. But as Nigel said, I think there's also a factor that kind of, as you said, I mean, last time people wanted to send the Conservative parties, both of them, a message. I don't think a lot of them intended to. They said, I've had it with these guys. I'm throwing one at the NDP, never really thinking the NDP would win. And holy cow, now we got 4 years of NDP. This gives them a safety vent. Okay, I'm tired of the UCP, as Nigel said, but I just can't go NDP. Throw it at the Alberta Party. At least it's a lost vote for the UCP, but it's not a gain vote for the NDP. So it's a catchment for them. So it could work out that way. If they do pull UCP, outright pull them though, then they could be troublesome. Again, they're not going to win seats, but they can be a kingmaker in some of those.
So does this by-election mean we don't have to stop talking about them?
I don't think we got a lot to say about them, aside from after the next election, we'll talk about how much of a factor they were in the 6 ridings where the split was by that much. Mm-hmm. But aside from that, I don't think they're much worth talking about.
Yeah, and even where they make up the difference, it's difficult to figure out. Are they coming from the NDP pile, or are they coming from the UCP pile? I don't know. Okay, let's talk about splits while we're at it. Saskatchewan splitting from Ottawa and joining alongside Alberta. Alberta, really with Smith getting the ball rolling with the Sovereignty Act. You had a white paper kind of haphazardly released by the Saskatchewan government a number of months ago. This has now resulted in the Saskatchewan First Act. There was just about a month ago, maybe a little more, month and a half, you had Alberta first, and then Saskatchewan, then Yukon, and I think New Brunswick, all coming together saying, we are not enforcing the latest federal gun ban. This is silly law, and we have better priorities for our law enforcement.
Wasn't Manitoba in on that?
Oh, and Manitoba.
Yes.
And you're right. Manitoba was in there too. But now you've got the Saskatchewan First Act coming alongside the Alberta Sovereignty Act. So we'll call it, I think, the Sovereignty Pact of provinces.
Sovereignty Pact it is. Yeah.
Willing to put into legislation open defiance of federal orders in many cases. I guess first, maybe tell us a bit about the Saskatchewan First Act. And I guess it's hard to compare it to the Alberta Sovereignty Act because we don't know the Alberta Sovereignty Act.
No.
We know the general principles of it, but give us a rundown of it and how tough it is.
So basically the idea of the Saskatchewan First Act is that this, I'm quoting here off the Saskatchewan government website, is to clearly confirm Saskatchewan's sovereign autonomy and assert Saskatchewan's exclusive legislative jurisdiction under the Constitution of Canada over 1, exploration for non-renewable natural resources, 2, the development, conservation, and management of non-renewable natural and forestry resources, and 3, the operation of sites and facilities for the generation and production of electrical energy. Now you'd think, well, why would you need to legislate that? It's already there. Well, yes, it is, except that the federal government chooses to ignore the fact that it's already there. So both Alberta and Saskatchewan have introduced, or Saskatchewan has introduced legislation. I imagine the Alberta legislation will be broadly similar, and it will be underlining and putting in boldface what the provincial rights under the Constitution are. But I think the most important thing is that the 2 provinces together, sending that message to Ottawa, combined with the earlier message that you just referred to about the firearms restrictions, they are telling Ottawa to stop. Now, you can perhaps imagine a scenario where Ottawa decides to keep on pushing. But when you've got a significant part of the country pushing back, it's not as easy as when it was just a matter of signing an order in council and things start to happen. It becomes political. If it becomes a horse trading thing. This is good for these 2 provinces to do work together.
The way you've described it, though, this is the Saskatchewan First Act is really constrained to really just resource development, oil, gas, hydro, forestry. Didn't sound like it gets into much else, though. Like the Saskatchewan legislature would, similar to how the Sovereignty Act in Alberta is conceived of, at least, that the Alberta legislature would pass a special motion, say we are not enforcing the federal gun grab. It doesn't sound like the Saskatchewan First Act would include that. It seems restricted to the purely economic sphere.
Yes, and it's the economic sphere that's always where things come head to head. Go back 40 years to when we were dealing with Mr. Trudeau's father over the National Energy Program. What was it that brought that down?
Well,
I'm not
belittling it. Resources and economic development
absolutely
are huge, but it does seem to be more limited in scope, though, than, again, the kind of the drawing board version of the Sovereignty Act as we're conceiving of it right now. Whereas the Sovereignty Act goes beyond just economics and resource development into how are the police going to be used in enforcing the criminal code? Are we going to treat firearms owners like, they're crack dealers or something like that?
Yeah.
So it seems to be more limited. Cory, what do you think the political impact will be, first in Saskatchewan and then nationally, by Saskatchewan doing something like this, which, even if it's got differences from the Alberta Sovereignty Act, I think it's going to be widely perceived as in the same stream as it.
Yeah, well, I think it'll have some impact nationally, just in the fact that it's a recognition that these provinces are outright acknowledging that this is not a benign federal government. They have to proactively protect themselves from our federal government. That's why we're seeing legislations, whether it's the Sovereignty Act or Saskatchewan's initiative, even if there's differences within them, they're both saying, look, we've got a problem in Ottawa and we have to set up our barricades because they are going to infringe upon our authority. And prior to that, it was always, we wait until the infringement happens and then the battle starts. Now it's getting, proactive. And that's a change of tone. That's that's just assuming that the government's going to be hostile towards yourself. And I don't know how much national news it'll make, how much people will pay attention to it, but it's significant. And then when the battle comes, and it's not a matter of if, when something comes,
next time.
Yes, then then this could come to prominence, because we got governments that now have a game plan already in place to deal with the federal government when something happens. And
Yeah, I think it's very significant too that the personal factor is here. I don't know that Danielle Smith and Scott Moe are personal friends, but they see the world in much the same way. It's going to be very easy for them to say one phone call is all it takes, and they're working together.
So actually, let's dive into that a bit. So on her social media accounts, Danielle Smith was sharing Scott Moe's posts about the Saskatchewan First Act, and she was kind of giving it thumbs up, and she was herself comparing it to the Sovereignty Act, as if she's saying hey, look, I'm not on my own here. Alberta's not even on its own. We have other provinces jumping in. Here's Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan's, at least when the NDP are not in power here, tends to be kind of the brother or sister province of Alberta. They tend to walk in lockstep now as a bloc. The Sovereignty Pact. What impact do you think the Saskatchewan First Act will have on, say, the saleability of the Sovereignty Act in Alberta? How significantly does this make it easier to sell the Sovereignty Act? It's not just Alberta kicking up a storm by itself.
The people who don't like the Sovereignty Act now are who? The NDP, the media.
And a significant number of more leftwards UCPers, although that was leadership race, parties tend to fall in line, but I'm not sure if the same will be, I'm sure among the general electorate of UCP voters, there's probably still some skeptics.
I would have to say that the fact that Saskatchewan joins Alberta in this effort is not going to persuade the Alberta media, and it's not going to persuade the Alberta NDP. They will continue their attacks upon this whole concept as either foolishness or in some way un-Canadian. However, everybody else, okay, if Saskatchewan's in on this too, maybe it's not such a bad idea. And in the end, I don't know that the media has the credibility anymore to make it stick. The NDP, through their union associations, will beat this drum until your ears ring. But those who are going to vote NDP already know they're going to vote MP. It's not a debatable issue. This is going to help.
So, Cory, I don't think anything will convince the NDP and unions and stuff like that, or media, that they're set as hard opponents. But I think there are, say, softer UCP voters, maybe disproportionately from the former PC wing, people who tended more to vote PC than Wildrose, people who disproportionately did not vote for Smith in the leadership race. But I'm not talking just members, I'm talking general voters. So, people who were less sympathetic to Smith in the race, people who were less enthusiastic about the idea of, or even opposed to the Sovereignty Act. Do you think this will go any way into making this more saleable? That Saskatchewan's done this?
Definitely. I mean, she's not standing alone. I mean, something that opponents, from Jason Kenney starting it, saying she was nuttier than squirrel poop for pushing it, to Andrew Coyne referring to her as Premier Loon. Well, now she's with another premier who's quite rational as well. And she's not alone. It's not an outlier. It's not an individual. This is somebody with a similar economic outlook, a similar challenges going on, and coming up with a similar strategy to deal with Ottawa. This isn't an outlier. She's representing a segment of the population that wants something. If it was still just Smith alone standing with this sort of approach, you could really sideline her and make it sound like it's an individual effort. But now that Saskatchewan is moving in a similar direction, I think it gives her a great deal more strength in putting this forward and making it sound like it has more broad appeal.
Yep.
Okay, well, we're going to switch it up now. Last night were the midterm elections in the United States. There was a lot of anticipation of the big red wave. It does appear that the Republicans have made some gains, but not the smashing wave some were predicting. So we'll start with what's easier right now. Right now, most projections, Fox News at least right now, has you need 218 seats to control the House of Representatives. Republicans are 206, solidly leading or elected. Democrats at 177. So the Republicans are, So it looks like the Republicans are going to take the House. That was more expected. The Senate still in play. There's 100 seats, so 50% equals a deadlock. Although then the vice president, who is the president of the Senate, gets to cast a tie-breaking vote. It's really the only time the vice president has any official constitutional powers, unless the president's dead. Right now, the Democrats are at 48. The Republicans are at 49. And it's now been called that the Senate sorry, the Georgia seat in the Senate
runoff, yeah.
is going to a runoff. So Republicans look like they got the House. They might get the Senate by hair. I think their worst case scenario is probably a 50-50 split, but that still leaves it effectively in the hands of the Democrats because the vice president breaks the tie. Start with you, Cory. Do you think this is a disappointing night for the Republicans that they didn't quite smash it the way some were predicting, or is this a good enough win?
It's disappointing. They expected much more. What I'm hoping is it's a wake-up call. I mean, the Americans are kind of predictable in one way. In their midterms, they like to vote against their government. It's a strategic thing. They want to see balance. Okay, we want to make sure somebody doesn't have control of all three levels of government. We're going to give it, whether it's a Republican government, then they'll go Democrat with the House. I mean, it's pretty solid, that record. And that's part of why the Republicans had the confidence going into this, thinking we're going to really take control. And it was a lot softer. A lot of seats they really thought were locked are now in play, or perhaps lost altogether. I think we're going to work into that, though. They've really got to reevaluate their association with Trump. That's
we're going to get.
Yeah, that's
Trump.
I don't want to get ahead of us on it. But
don't get ahead.
I don't think they can call this a victory. And I guess we'll move along as to why it shouldn't be considered one. I mean, it's better no loss. They certainly could have not taken the House and other things, but it wasn't a sweeping red wave as they hoped.
Nigel, again, we're going to get to Trump in a moment. I know it's impossible to talk about this stuff without Trump, but we're going to do our best to talk about the things that are not Trump before we get to Trump. The red wave was predicted. Definitely, it's a red maybe tide. It's come in, and they've taken the House. They've got I don't know if I'm betting they've got a 60% chance of taking the Senate by a seat, maybe, but maybe not even that. If you're a Republican strategist right now, are you looking into this and saying victory or shit, we're in trouble in 2 years?
So I want to give some credit to Linda Slobodian's column. You may have seen it already. It's been up for a couple of hours. And she points out that whereas the Republicans campaigned on those things which they believed on the basis of polling were the important issues to the American voter, the Democrats campaigned on the right to abortion and on this idea that President Biden was floating in the last week that somehow democracy is on the ballot, and if you vote for a Republican, then you're likely to...
You're voting for the end of democracy.
You're voting for the end of the world, as we know it. And somehow or other, that right to abortion struck closer to the hearts of the Democrat voter than all of these other issues, which you would think would be the more important issues to a nation. Can't explain it. That's her theory. Encourage you to read the article and draw your own conclusions. But clearly, what happened. The red wave did not take place. People still voted Democrat. Why? I think our columnist, Linda Slobodian, gives a very plausible explanation as to why that is so. And it's got nothing to do with Trump.
Okay, well, we're going to get on to Trump because it's really hard to discuss this without talking about Trump. He is the Republican elephant in the room. So Trump is expected to formally announce that he's going to run for the Republican nomination again, presidential nomination, within about a week. I think November 14th or so is the date that's been kind of pegged that he's likely to do that. He's been playing a pretty active role really since the last presidential election. He has not gone away at all. I don't think he's taken a break. I don't know if the guy's taken a vacation. He's just been in political campaign mode the whole time, building up his support in the party. He's the presumptive nominee even before it goes. He wants to go, he's going to go. Trump is popular among a majority of Republicans. He's extraordinarily unpopular among most Democrats. But even a very sizable minority of Republicans, not just more left-leaning, say Rockefeller Republicans, but some who just don't like his temperament. They don't, they think he's too narcissistic, things like this. He's not necessarily beloved by all Republicans, let alone independents. Cory, with Trump looming large over the background here, Do you think he was a help or a hindrance to the Republican cause?
Oh, he was a hindrance. He's a spent force. I mean, I know he's got some very strong supporters within the Republican Party. Absolutely. I mean, and that's part of almost what puts people off. It's almost cult-like with some of the people and how they are hung up on him. I mean, it's the nature of strongly partisan politics, I guess. But you look at the close races where he endorsed. Pennsylvania should have gotten a Republican, and he went and endorsed Oz, and I think that was a kiss of death. The Georgia runoff that's coming, likewise. I mean, when the endorsement of that person isn't actually a boost to the people he endorsed, that's a reflection on how the whole party could suffer if he's the leader going into the next election. I think they very strongly, and I know it's hard because you could really rip your party to shreds going by that. The people within the Republican Party have got to think about the swing voters, not the hardcore Republicans in there, because I just don't see, I mean, Trump's always Trump. He is just that unique character that he is. And if he couldn't win the last time, I just can't see him winning in 2 years from now. So if they want to give Biden 4 more years on a point of principle, put Trump in there as your candidate.
I don't, you might mean the Democrats. I cannot imagine.
If he could live that long with us.
Geriatric guy with his head in a jar up for president again. I feel like even the Democrats know they're going to need another candidate.
I think they've really got to look within and see what they're doing.
It does seem Trump's endorsements are a huge help in Republican primaries, getting the nomination to be a Republican candidate somewhere. But the nomination, at least in some areas, particularly more purple areas where there's actually a real match with the Democrats, it does. And many of his endorsed candidates did end up going down. Do you think the Republicans need to maybe distance themselves a bit from Trump? And then following that, can they? Is he just too big a presence that it's impossible to?
That was my first reaction was, well, should they? Can they?
They're two very different questions.
They are. He is a force that won't go away, and he does have a tremendous following. The thing that people like about him, and I can grant you that there are all kinds of personal reasons why people may choose to not like him, because he says offensive things to people who maybe don't deserve it. But a lot of the things that he promised, he got done. I mean, just to name one, he promised energy security. He achieved energy security. Well, isn't it interesting that the first thing that Biden did when he came into office was to kill Keystone and then stop drilling in the Anwar and a number of other things. Now the U.S. president is forced to go to the Middle East and ask politely if they would just open the faucets a little more, give us more oil, keep the price down, because we have these midterms coming up. I mean, that's appalling. Trump would never have let that happen. So I'm constantly coming back to the image of the airline pilot and the brain surgeon. The airline pilot who is a happy chappy and lands you in the wrong city is not the guy you want to be traveling with. The guy that you want to be traveling with can be all kinds of a personal jerk, but when he is flying, is right on the numbers all the time and gets you safely where you want to go, that's the fellow you want to travel with. If he's a jerk, so what? Same principle with brain surgeons. You want somebody with a great bedside manner, okay, maybe he's not the best surgeon. The guy you want is the best surgeon, and who cares what his manner is?
Well, I don't think it's just mannerisms. I think the way he dealt with, and I know something you're going to say, Trump didn't lose the election. Okay, well, I don't know.
How did you know I was going to say that?
Them. I'm talking to them.
You know it's coming.
I know you're going to be in the comment section. I'm anticipating you now. Trump didn't lose. Okay, look, I don't know. But the courts ruled that he did. And every single court, including judges that Trump himself appointed, they all ruled he did. So I don't know. But because I'm not an expert in it, I'm going to have to more or less say all of these different courts, including Trump appointees, are probably right. The way he handled that appeared dangerous to many people. So I don't think it's just mannerisms. I think it's concerned. I think even his greatest defenders would have to admit he's an extreme narcissist. Maybe that's a good thing in politics. You have to be a little bit narcissistic.
Maybe it's a good thing in brain surgeons too.
Maybe I don't know. But let's kind of talk about the coming presidential primary, because it ties in last night. One of the really big wins for Republicans was Ron DeSantis in Florida. 2018, he won with 0.4% of the vote, if I'm not mistaken. Razor thin. Florida is considered a pretty purple state. I mean, I don't know how many U.S. presidential elections have hinged on the votes in Florida. And DeSantis last night won, the last time I checked, it was between 17 and 20%. Crushing defeat. Probably one of the widest margins of victory at the state level in Florida in a long time. Now, DeSantis was the first significant U.S. public office holder to stick his neck out and break with the consensus around COVID, around lockdowns, around mandatory vaccination, mandatory masking. Oh, and just in case you're watching YouTube censors, I endorse all of those things. They're great. I love them. I would never question them. I'm just talking about the madman from Florida who says all these terrible, misinformed things. He was severely rewarded by voters last night with just a thumping margin of victory. But he also said he's not good. He's been widely touted as a great candidate for the Republican nomination, presidential nomination. But he's not going to run because it's obvious no one can beat Trump for it. Trump has just got a lock on that party. What does it say that a guy like DeSantis, who he checks all the boxes and had a crushing win in a swing state that's not reliably Republican, or at least hasn't been until now. What does it say that a guy like DeSantis, who would normally be a leading contender for the Republican presidential nomination, isn't even going to try?
First of all, I wouldn't expect him to say he was going to try at this stage.
But he said he's not doing it.
Well, he said
They always say that.
But I don't think he. Well, no. Normally you give a bullshit political answer. Well, I'm focused on my voters in Florida right now, and I haven't consulted with my family, and I'm not thinking about that right now. I'm thinking about the bullshit lines. You've heard it a billion times from politicians before. He just said no, he's not doing it.
He's an OBS guy.
Yeah,
I wouldn't put it past any of them.
I don't think he's going to do it because he probably can't win. I don't think anyone else can beat Trump for the Republican nomination this year. So what does it say that guys like him, operating on the assumption he meant what he said, and I think he does. What does it say that guys like him aren't even going to try?
Well, what it says to me is that nobody who was going to try would tip their hand right now. There's a year to go, and before things get hot. And it would be very silly to open that up. And
the jockeying starts now.
Yeah.
If you take yourself out of the running, the reason they give these bullshit answers is because you want to still be able to go out and quietly raise some money, arrange the right campaign organizers. If you just take yourself completely out of the running, you got to cut yourself off from that. You make it harder to build that stuff.
There's going to be a draft DeSantis campaign, to be sure of it.
Okay, so you are just rejecting the premise of my question. You think DeSantis actually, there's a good chance he's actually going to run. He's going to do it.
I don't think he totally means what he says. No, I think that is, I cannot imagine if you put the microphone in his face as they did and said, "Are you going to run?" I can't imagine him at this time saying, "Yes, I'm seriously considering it."
No, but he didn't do the political answer, which is, well, I'm not thinking about it at this time, but I will talk to the people of Florida and I'll talk to my family.
They'll always come back with the circumstances change.
Maybe. Okay, so
I'll tell you what, though, if he doesn't, I don't know who is going to come forward and say, "Yeah,
okay,
me."
Let me revise the question then, since you would completely reject the premise of my first. Do you think a guy like
like the first time I did that?
Do you think a guy like Ron? Do you think Ron DeSantis or anyone else in America would stand a prayer's chance of beating Trump for the Republican nomination?
DeSantis would, yes.
You think he would?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And he has all the positives that Trump has, and he has significantly fewer negatives.
Well, I do know, I think it was just yesterday or something, Trump was tweeting some elusive thing that, I don't know, was tweeting, but on his Truth Social or something, something like a tweet saying, good thing DeSantis isn't running because I've got the dirt on him. I'll bring him down if he goes. And it's that kind of shit that, there was a time I was like, Trump might be a bit of an ass, but he's our ass, and he'll go in there and he'll piss them off and shake it up. But then I see stuff like this, and I'm just, it soils me on a guy that on so many issues I should align with, but I just can't bring myself to do it. I just don't think he's got the character.
No, and I don't think you're alone with that. Like that's where I don't know if you can necessarily rule out. I think there's a core of Republicans who are at the point too of, I could still even like and respect him, but think his period is past. It's time to move ahead. And if the right candidate can present themselves, they would gravitate towards it. I mean, he's going to be.
Do you think someone, DeSantis or anyone, could actually beat him?
I think it's possible. I think it's be damn tough.
Put a percentage on it. What percentage chance is it possible?
I put it at 20%.
A 20% chance,
which is low. I mean, I wouldn't want to bet my house on a 20% odds, but I wouldn't see it in the realm of impossibility.
You've got a 20% chance, and say you're DeSantis, you're the freshly reelected governor of Florida, and you're the toast of the Republican Party. You just annihilated the Democrats in a purple state. Everyone hails you globally as the guy who stuck his neck out and broke the absolutely correct and never wrong scientific consensus of the World Health Organization. He's toasted as the guy who's first stuck his neck out on this stuff. Why would you risk your reputation to be savage by a guy like Trump who goes for the jugular on a 20% chance of getting the nomination to then just face the Democrats? It just doesn't look like a good bargain for someone with anything to lose.
Well, if it was somebody who, if it's all about him and his career and reputation, what you've said makes logical sense and very good sense. If, however, he is driven in any way by a sense of I'm doing this for America, maybe he could get past that. I will give you this on your question. It is entirely conceivable that he would sit this one out, because in another,
that's more likely.
Trump is now going to be in his 80s.
And who knows if he wins or loses the next general?
Right.
I don't know.
Win or lose, the years roll by. He could be the man for 2028. That might cause him to just wait, because he's young enough. He's got time to.
And also, even if you did somehow beat Trump in the Republican primary, I think Trump would not accept the loss. He'll say it was crooked, it was rigged, and he runs as an independent to spoil it for the Republicans. And he pulls a Teddy Roosevelt. Democrats win. I think he'd just run under any circumstance that he lost the Republican nomination. And I don't think he would lose it. But if he did, he would just claim it was corrupt. He would claim it was rigged. He
would dynamite his own party out of spite. There's no doubt about that with him. But I mean,
I think he would run as an independent, or I don't know. He's not really a libertarian, but take over the libertarians or something. I don't know. Probably run just as an independent, and might even win a couple states. But I think he'd probably do that to dynamite the Republicans as a result. So like if you're anyone with anything to lose here, or even if you want to put America first, thinking, well, geez, I do this. You're not even really getting the Republican nomination because the Republican Party would just fracture.
That's what you're looking at, though. I mean, when I'm saying 20%, I'm saying 20% today. Give it 6 months when they're working behind the scenes, when he's looking at things, when things are moving. And again, that might drop to 10% or it might jump. That's a fluid situation down there. And I mean, yes, as you said, strategically, it would look great. Look, you're riding the top of the world. Wait your 4 years to hit the next primaries. You'll be,
his problem is he's peaking right now.
Yeah.
He will never be more popular with Republicans to win the nomination than right now.
So that temptation is riding over there, and he might dive. I mean, we can't rule anything out.
He's come out of COVID riding pretty for his treasonous acts of opposing the very sound advice of the World Health Organization, Mr. YouTube censors. He's probably not going to be more popular than he is right now. 4 years, actually not even 4 years. It's 6 years from now. They might not remember him. He'll just be another governor probably. I mean, that's your honeymoon is not that long in politics. Another 6 years, he'll have been there a decade. And in a decade, barnacles collect.
You've got to wonder how many of those 19 points by which he won his seat were people who had moved to Florida from New York and from California and from other places where the governance had gone to hell.
Yeah.
I give Newsom 4 more years in California now. Let's see what he can do with that.
I had family move to Florida. Now they can't vote because they're not U.S. citizens, but I had family move to Florida. He's definitely created a whole new wave of interstate migration. Okay, well, I think we'll wrap it up there. We normally don't get that far into U.S. politics, but I think we all agreed we had to.
It's just fun.
We had to get this one off our chest, boys. Okay, well, thank you guys for joining, and thank all of you for joining us today. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go to westernstandard.news, sign up. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year. We appreciate your support for bailout-free, independent Western media. Please stay tuned for the Market Commodities Agriculture Report. Have a good night, and God bless.
The current Lethbridge feed grain prices are as follows. Cash barley's at $4.53, feed wheat's at $4.70, and corn's also sitting at $4.70 per metric ton. In the milling wheat markets, December Minneapolis futures lost 5 cents at $9.45, with local hard red spring bids for December movement at $12 per bushel delivered. In the oilseeds, nearby canola futures increased $6.50 at $8.90.70 per ton, with delivered values for December trading at $19.97 per bushel. In the pulse markets, nearby red lentils are trading at 32.5 cents a pound, and yellow peas remain at $13 per bushel. In the cattle markets, December live cattle lost 92 cents at $152.12 per 100 weight. For information on grain marketing, call me at 403-394-1711. I'm Sean Smith at Marketplace Commodities, accurate real-time marketing information and pricing options.